All right, so thank you for joining us. My name is Richard Suls, and I've been doing a lot of talks in the Nordics lately. I expect you to be an audience that laughs at my jokes a little more than the Finns do. We'll see. I'm the global co-chair of advisory services at now Reversec. And what does that mean? That basically means we're the defensive folks within the hacking group. And I've got a lot of hands-on experience before coming here. I worked for myself for 13 years as a security consultant and expert witness within the courts. And if you want to hear some interesting things about murder cases, come find me after this talk. So since I was young, I've been pushing buttons, and now I get to do that professionally. It's a ton of fun, and it upsets my parents a lot less, honestly. And I'm going to talk to you about two things with this talk. Cybersecurity, obviously, but more importantly, leadership, and leadership in a crisis. And that's what this is all about, right? Is you've got concurrent pressures in a crisis from journalists, stockholders, maybe regulators. Leadership is calmly dealing with that, but it doesn't just happen without practice. So what is this? It's the ultimate test of your leadership, of your senior teams. You want to see what they're made of, give them to me. It's the game of cones, why your crisis plan shouldn't melt under pressure. And I have great news for everybody. The great news is that you can turn chaos into control through practice. After I've concluded my presentation, I would love to hear any kind of stories about your experience in crisis or crisis testing. So if you keep that in mind throughout this, I'd be happy to discuss it with you or hear your stories. So what are these exercises? And this is probably the wordiest slide I've got. But basically, both of these exercises, crisis management exercises and technical tabletop exercises, are ways of simulating a crisis. Our technical tabletop basically is simulating very detailed technical crises that are custom made for your organization, whereas crisis management really strips out all of that technical stuff so executives can focus purely on business, legal, reputational impacts, things that decide whether and how they engage regulators, communicate with stakeholders, and handle perhaps ransomware, for instance. So many organizations don't prepare for a crisis until they're in the middle of one. If you could imagine that we have a playbook with us, a crisis management playbook, it would look pretty unused, and you might imagine that it just gets shredded right now because, in my experience, working with crisis management exercises, over 90% of the people I work with don't even pick up the playbook once, believe it or not. So this very expensive playbook becomes ultimately unexercised, unused, and in some cases, honestly, inaccessible, because a lot of organizations don't think, if my playbook sits on my on my shared network drive, and then suddenly there's a threat actor inside my infrastructure, am I going to be able to access it? So print your playbooks is, quite frankly, the only takeaway that I would give from this if you have to have one. Print your playbooks, look at your playbooks. A well-prepared organization is going to thrive under this pressure. They're not going to fold the way that a completely untested one might. Proactive exercises will help you to identify the weaknesses when an organization is calm and it's capable of taking the time to address them. So crisis management isn't really a luxury, it's essential for survival. By a show of hands, could you tell me, everybody who has a driver's license, would you raise your hand for a moment? All right, so most of the room. Now think about when you first started driving, right? If you're as old as I am, it was probably a stick shift. You had to engage the clutch, release it at the right time, press on the gas. You had to be aware of everything around you. But think about driving the last time you got in a car. You didn't do any of that stuff consciously. You just knew how to. And that's what this is about. That's about practicing, and just testing it until you've gotten to the point where you know how to do it without thinking about it. Think about gap analysis, like a medical checkup. You go to the doctor, your organization needs a doctor. You need to understand all the tests that could be run. You don't want to find out, once you've already gotten ill, what the problem is. You want to deal with it as soon as you can identify it and start to course correct it. And lastly, team empowerment. Think about that like an orchestra. You might have the most talented horn players, cellists, violinists, drummers on the planet, but if they don't practice together, they're worthless as a team. So again, what do we do? What do these exercises do? They expose gaps before they become catastrophic. Their purpose is to uncover gaps in the process. It's to improve leadership decision-making skills. It's to increase confidence and coordination among teams. And again, there are different types of these exercises. You've got your technical tabletops. You've got your simulations. You've got your business continuity exercises. What you get to do, though, is find out who the calmest person on your team is on the most critical day of their life in a simulation. So prevention is always better than reaction. Something that I've been touting for a while internally and with our clients is that you're going to pay significantly less to remediate than you're going to pay to recover. Makes sense, but it doesn't always make sense to the money nerds, for instance, who are trying to save the money, understand where their outlay is, and don't quite understand team preparedness necessarily from a X to Y mapping. Crisis exercises, though, provide real-time feedback, and they help teams understand what works and what doesn't in the moment. The process can be iterative and should be iterative. Every exercise helps to refine the plans further. Sometimes customers come to me after an exercise and they ask us to develop an entire crisis management framework because we've peeled back what's going on with them and they realize this isn't going to work for us. We need something more concrete. So another thing I would mention is that change, which you may have noticed we're going through right now, becoming Reversec, is easier done in small doses. You don't want to just completely change and migrate your entire IT system overnight, which, by the way, we did not do. We did it in a very formal, stepped process, which made it a lot easier than, for instance, the last migration I was a part of. So you get to align your leadership and your technical teams. It's a testing ground, right? It lets you and your colleagues make actions that are more predictable when the actual crisis occurs. And a gap analysis identifies those communication breakdowns and process weaknesses that you may not be aware of. And why a pyramid? Well, because this all starts with trust and predictability built on communication. When you have that in place, a unified response can be easier and more natural across all stakeholders. So something to keep in mind, again, this is iterative. It's not just antivirus software from 1997, where you install it and you forget about it. Or in some of our cases, as security researchers, you never install it. So again, if there's one thing that you take away from this, it is please print your playbooks. If you pay for it, sits on your server, it's not doing a whole lot of good. You pay for it, sits in a drawer, not doing a lot of good. But you test it and you refine it. And that's how you get prepared for these crises. So with these exercises, we tend to look at clear objectives by defining the scope and the goal of the exercise. We use realistic scenarios because, quite frankly, it's not going to mean a lot to your teams if it doesn't hit home with realism. We always have post-exercise contents. We have a debrief, a learning session that goes along with these, a whiteboarding session. Really right at the end where participants are still a little heated from the experience, maybe a little running on adrenaline, but they have good ideas and they have good ways of moving the process forward, and that's a great time to capture that. And of course, regular scheduling, because these exercises aren't just a one and done, they're a continuous practice, right? When we conduct exercises, we forecast improvements, we schedule other exercises, we kind of keep the iteration moving forward. So again, you heard me say earlier, we're turning chaos into controlled response. And how are we doing that? We're doing that through ensuring decision makers and responders are aligned with each other and that they're effectively communicating with each other because you've done this before. You have established protocols for this. And of course, so important with teams is trust building. In this day and age where we see less and less of each other through remote work, you need to have the trust of the person next to you in the chain or responsible for a piece that feeds into you or you feed into them within this process. The trust can really be built through these in-person experiences best. We conduct remote exercises. They have great experiences. They still peel things back, but the best ones are in person. So what are the key takeaways? Well, first of all, this is a method of creating resilience for your C-suite, right? It's a method of identifying weaknesses within your playbook. It helps you to enhance your security posture. And it gives you an opportunity to adapt your crisis preparedness. So in closing, I'd like you to think about one more analogy, and that's physical therapy, right? If you do the exercises that are established by the professionals, you twist your ankle, what do? Do you drop a bag of frozen peas on it? Or do you go see a doctor? If you go see a doctor, you're probably going to have better results than if you just drop a bag of frozen peas on it. And that's kind of the idea, right? We want to triage these things together. We want to understand what the weakness is, what the vulnerability is, what the wound is to help build back anew. It creates a better form of adaptability in your teams and a culture of readiness, or it contributes to your culture of readiness. So you test before your crisis, address your gaps early, align your teams, and again, enhance your cybersecurity posture. So I just want to ask you a few questions to think about, maybe discuss with me or one of us later over dinner. But what are the common issues that you might uncover from these exercises? Ones that I have are human and process bottlenecks. I often like to send a player in these exercises away on vacation on a deserted island during one of these injects. And the reason is because frequently you have one or two people who are very top-heavy in the room. They know all of the cloud going on, or they know all of the disaster recovery going on, all of the backups, but nobody else knows what to do when they're gone. And that is a great discovery for the organization, of course, because you can't have those bottlenecks in real life. What are your single points of failure? Again, is it a human being? Is it a process? Do you have outdated materials or playbooks? And is there a lack of visibility into the playbooks, the process details? Are all of the people who are responsible within the playbooks aware of their responsibilities? Not always. So one more question. What is the biggest mistake that most companies make? And that is that they completely ignore their playbooks within the first 30 minutes. I see it all the time. I cannot express enough that if you have a playbook, and quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, that other 10% tend to forget about their playbooks within the first 30 to 45 minutes because they get into that adrenaline and then they just do not remember that there is a way, there's a model for this. And these exercises can help them to come back to that, to bring down the adrenaline, to understand in a real crisis what is required of them and what is expected of them.